They laughed the first time she stepped into the barracks. A low, sharp laugh that spread across the room like a cruel fire. Their eyes locked on her face, on the faint but jagged scars that ran from her cheekbone down to her jawline. She could feel their stares more than their words. But when the whispers turned to jokes, she lowered her eyes and pretended not to hear, except she did hear every word. And each word cut deeper than the scars ever could. But what no one in that room knew was the truth behind those marks. A truth powerful enough to silence even the loudest soldier. She held her breath, trying to blend into the walls, but you can't hide in a place like that. One Marine, broad-shouldered and arrogant, smirked and asked if she'd picked a fight with a wild cat and lost. Another said her face looked like a map of mistakes. She bit her tongue, refusing to defend herself. If she spoke, her voice would tremble, and trembling wasn't allowed here. She had fought too hard, bled too much to let them see her break. Still, her chest tightened with each laugh that followed. Would they ever see her as anything but the scars on her face? That night, she lay on her bunk, staring at the ceiling, the laughter echoing in her mind. Her hands trembled as she remembered the night of the fire, the thick smoke choking her lungs, the heat pressing against her skin, the sound of her little brother screaming from inside the collapsing house. She hadn't thought twice. She had run back in, flames clawing at her skin, dragging him out with everything she had. The fire had left its mark, but her brother was alive. That was the only thing that mattered. But no one here knew that. No one here cared. They just saw the scars. And still, she whispered to herself, "Hold on. Tomorrow will be different." The next day, training was brutal. She was slower than most, her body still stiff from old burns. But she pushed until her muscles screamed. Sweat mixed with memory, every step reminding her of why she was here. She wanted to serve, to protect, to prove that sacrifice wasn't weakness. The others watched, still mocking under their breath, but she didn't stop. Each insult became fuel. Still, the sting remained. Would her scars always speak louder than her courage? 1 week later, everything changed. The general arrived unannounced for inspection. His presence alone silenced the room, his boots hitting the floor like thunder, his eyes sharp and commanding. He walked down the line of Marines, inspecting each one without a word. And then he stopped in front of her, his gaze locked on her face. And for the first time since she had arrived, the room went completely still. The mocking Marines smirked, expecting him to turn her away to confirm what they had been saying. But instead, the general froze. His eyes softened, his jaw tightened, and his hands trembled almost imperceptibly. He whispered something under his breath, something only she caught. "It's you." The words hit her like a storm. The room held its breath. The general straightened, but his voice cracked with emotion as he spoke. Years ago, there was a house fire near the base. A young girl ran through the flames and carried out a boy half her size. She collapsed before the medics arrived, her body covered in burns. I was one of the men who pulled her from the wreckage that night. I never forgot her face. His voice broke. And I never forgot those scars. They were the scars of a hero. Silence. Heavy, suffocating silence. The same Marines who had laughed days earlier now stood stiff, their faces pale with shame. The weight of the general's words hung in the air like a judgment. She blinked back tears, her chest rising with the first deep breath she'd taken since arriving. For the first time, her scars were not a mark of weakness, but of unshakable strength. The general turned to the others, his voice thundering. Now these scars are the price of courage, of sacrifice, of love that runs deeper than fear. If any of you cannot respect that, you do not deserve the uniform you wear. His words carved through the room like steel. No one dared look at her again with anything but respect. Later that evening, she sat alone on the training field, the sunset casting gold across her face. The scars were still there, and they always would be. But now, when she touched them, she didn't feel the sting of shame. She felt her brother's laughter, the warmth of his arms, the life she had saved. She felt the weight of the general's words, a reminder that scars were not meant to be hidden, but carried with pride. The same Marines who had once mocked her approached quietly, one by one, offering awkward apologies. She didn't answer them with words, only with a small nod. She had already forgiven them in her heart, because she knew now that their laughter had never defined her, and their acceptance wasn't what she had been fighting for. She had been fighting to prove something to herself, that she was more than the pain she had endured. As the last light of day faded, she whispered to herself the truth she had waited so long to believe. These scars are my strength, and they always will be. And in that moment, she knew she had already won. Not the war outside, but the one inside her. If you like this story, kindly thumbs up, and thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.